"You deserve to know the truth," my sister said, tears sliding down her face as she handed my fiancé her phone. Aaron stared at the screen. Then he looked up at me the way you look at someone who has suddenly become a stranger. The engagement ring hit the dinner table with a sharp crack. Everyone in the room flinched. "I can't believe you cheated on me," he said. My mother gasped. My father pushed back his chair and stood up. I said I didn't do it. Kept saying it. Nobody stopped to listen. Aaron walked out. The front door closed behind him. My family stood in that dining room and stared at me like something had gone wrong with me overnight. My name is Vanessa Hale. In one single evening, at a table full of people who were supposed to love me, my sister stole my future. And when it was over, Maribel looked relieved. The next morning, Aaron had blocked me on everything. His number sent me straight to voicemail. His email came back unread. By noon, my aunt had sent a long, disappointed message asking how I could betray someone who had given me so much. By evening, 3 more relatives I barely spoke to had reached out, all with the same tone. They had already heard Maribel's version. She had moved fast. She had spent the previous night working through the family with her story polished and her tears ready, painting herself as the loyal sister who had carried a painful truth for far too long. Before I had spoken a single word in my own defense, the verdict had been delivered. I sat on my apartment floor that night and replayed every second of that dinner. Maribel had not just been ready for that moment. She had been building toward it. Maribel spent the following days in my mother's kitchen while the family gathered close. They brought food. They hugged her and told her she had done the right thing. My mother said on the phone that Maribel had hated having to do what she did, but she couldn't stay quiet and let it continue. My sister was being celebrated for her bravery, her loyalty, her honesty. Meanwhile, my calls went unanswered. My name was moving through family group chats like a warning. I drove past my parents' house one evening and saw several cars lined up out front. A gathering, almost certainly, to support Maribel through her difficult ordeal. Nobody had checked on me once. But the detail I kept returning to was not the silence. It was the expression on Maribel's face after Aaron walked out that night, in the one unguarded second before she remembered I was still watching. She had not looked sad. She had looked finished. I drove to my parents' house on the 3rd day after the dinner. My father met me at the door before I could knock. He stood with his arms folded and his jaw set, looking at me the way you look at someone whose case is already closed. "We saw the proof," he said. "There is nothing to talk about." I told him the screenshots were wrong, that something about them did not add up. He said I was only making things worse by continuing to deny what everyone had clearly seen. The door closed. I stood on the front step and looked at that door for a long moment. The house I had grown up in. The door I had walked through 1,000 times without thinking. And I understood something then, standing on that step. My family had not simply believed Maribel. They had been willing to believe her. That willingness was not new. It had been waiting beneath the surface for years, needing only a reason to step forward. 2 weeks after the dinner, a box arrived at my apartment door. Aaron had mailed back every gift I had ever given him. No letter, no note. Just the items carefully packed, as though he had wanted to be clean and efficient about removing every trace of me. I went through the box slowly. A watch I had saved 3 months to buy. A photo album from our first anniversary. A small carved figure from a trip we had taken together to the coast. At the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a thin silver necklace. I held it up and stared at it. It was the one I had worn the night Aaron proposed. The one Maribel had once picked up at a family dinner, turned over slowly in her fingers, and said was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. I had smiled at her that evening. Holding that necklace now, that memory felt like something I should have read very differently. About a month after everything ended, I found myself at a small gathering my cousin had arranged. Maribel was there, seated across from me, relaxed and smiling at her phone. She looked like someone whose life was running exactly according to plan. At one point, my mother leaned over and squeezed Maribel's hand and said she deserved happiness after everything she had been through. Maribel looked down and a faint blush crossed her cheeks. Not embarrassment. Satisfaction that had risen just a little too close to the surface. I watched her quietly for the rest of that evening. Something had shifted inside me over those weeks. The raw, breathless pain of the first few days had cooled into something quieter and more solid. Where the grief had been loudest, something else was now taking shape. Had no name yet, but it was patient, it was steady, and it was paying very close attention. 2 months after my engagement ended, Deo called me on a Thursday afternoon. She spoke carefully, the way people do when the news they are carrying might land hard. She told me she had seen Maribel and Aaron together at a restaurant across town. Corner table. The way Maribel had leaned toward him made it very clear this was not a coincidence. After the call I sat completely still for a long time. Maribel had not destroyed my engagement because she was loyal to Aaron. She had destroyed it to clear the path to him. Every detail of that dinner, the tears, the timing, the carefully placed screenshots, had been aimed at a single result. She had not ruined my relationship. She had taken it. Aaron had believed he was making a free choice in the aftermath of something broken. He had no idea he had been moved carefully into position long before that evening. My parents found out about Aaron and Maribel shortly after I did. I expected something from them. Pause at minimum. Some flicker of recognition that would make them stop and look at the full picture of what had happened. My mother called it unexpected but somehow beautiful. My father said love moved in ways people couldn't always predict or control. They had shut their door to me in 3 days. And now Aaron was at Sunday dinners. In holiday photographs. Being welcomed by the same people who had refused to hear my side. I heard all of it through Deo, who apologized before every update. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, the last of the grief went quiet. Not because the pain had passed. Because something had replaced it. Cold. Ill. Purposeful. I stopped crying that night. I opened a new document on my laptop and started writing everything down. Every date, every detail, every name. A message arrived from Petra, one of Maribel's old university friends, on a quiet Tuesday evening. She said she had gone back and forth for weeks about whether to reach out. In the end, she had decided I deserved to know. She told me Maribel had spoken about Aaron before my engagement. At a party, during the early weeks when Aaron and I had just started seeing each other. She had mentioned him by description, said she had noticed him first, and said things had not gone the way she wanted. I read the message slowly. Then again from the beginning. I thought back to a casual gathering, very early in my relationship with Aaron, where he had briefly met my family. I had thought nothing of it. He had seemed polite. Maribel had barely spoken to him. But she had been watching. The betrayal I thought had begun at a dinner table was years older than I had imagined. A few weeks later, I met Deo for coffee and she told me something she had been holding on to. At a small gathering the year before, Maribel had said, laughing casually, that men always eventually chose her. She had spoken about Aaron by description. She had called him easy. She had said it the way people say things they believe to be simply and obviously true. Deo had not taken it seriously at the time. She wasn't so sure anymore. I walked home slowly after that meeting. Everything I was learning burned steadily in my chest. The planning, the patience, the years of watching while I had no idea I was being watched. But somewhere between the corner and my front door, I noticed the burning beginning to change shape. It was not breaking me down anymore. It was becoming something I could actually use. Humiliation had become fuel, and I was not going to let a single drop of it go to waste. Through a contact who worked in graphic design, I finally obtained copies of the screenshots Maribel had shown Aaron that night. I examined them carefully. The timestamps on the messages did not follow the pattern of any real conversation. They had been set manually, and whoever had done it had not been precise enough. The font inside the message bubbles was slightly different from the font the app actually displayed, nearly invisible unless you had a specific reason to look. One contact name format used a style the app had removed from its interface more than a year before the screenshots were supposedly taken. The evidence that had destroyed my engagement had been built by hand. It had fingerprints all over it. I printed every page. I labeled every flaw with a clear note in plain language. I organized it all into a folder and put the folder somewhere safe. The lie had a shape now, and the shape pointed in one clear direction. I brought the folder to my mother's house on a Tuesday afternoon. I laid the printed pages across the kitchen table and walked her through each problem. The timestamps, the font, the formatting error that proved the screenshots had been created, not captured from any real exchange. She looked at the pages. Then she slid them back toward me and said I was obsessed. She did not try to explain what I had shown her. She did not point out anything I had gotten wrong. She simply decided she did not want to know and looked away. I drove home without speaking. I had understood somewhere beneath my hope that this was probably how it would go. Truth alone was not enough for people who had already built their piece on a different version of events. I needed more than printed evidence. I needed the right moment, the right room, proof that could not be quietly pushed across a table and refused. So I kept collecting, and I kept waiting. 6 months after my engagement ended, Maribel announced she and Aaron were getting married. She made the announcement at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, in the same dining room where she had handed him the fake screenshots. My mother cried before the news was even finished. My father hugged Aaron and said he was proud to call him family. The ring Maribel had chosen was almost identical in style to the one Aaron had once placed on my finger. Deo delivered the news that evening, apologizing 3 times before she finished. I thanked her and sat quietly for a few minutes. Then I opened my folder and looked at everything I had gathered over the past months. The labeled screenshots, Petra's message, the documented timeline. All of it organized, dated and sourced. Inside, something quiet and solid settled into place. The timeline was moving forward on its own now. All I had to do was stay ready. After the engagement announcement, I stopped trying to be believed. No more calls to relatives. No more showing up at gatherings. No more messages with attached evidence that nobody wanted to open. Instead, I got organized. I built a clean document sorting everything I had collected. Petra's message. Deo's account of what Maribel had said at that gathering. The technical breakdown of the fake screenshots with each flaw labeled in plain language. A written timeline of events, every one dated and sourced. Simple enough for anyone to follow in under 2 minutes. I also reached out quietly to a few people. Not to vent, but to ask careful questions and listen. Those conversations produced more pieces than I had expected. People who had spent real time around Maribel had small fragments of the larger picture that they had never thought to connect before. Every fragment made the full image clearer. And the image was becoming very difficult to argue with. The message that changed everything came from Petra on a Thursday evening. She called instead of texting. When someone calls, the news is worth hearing in real time. She had been sorting through an old private message archive and found something she had nearly scrolled past. She read it to me over the phone. It was a message Maribel had sent to a friend. It said, "Once he leaves Vanessa, the rest will be easy." It had been sent 2 weeks before the dinner. 2 weeks before the tears. Before the screenshots. Before the ring hit the table and Aaron walked out. Maribel had not acted from sudden loyalty or overwhelming concern. She had made a plan, told a friend about it, and then walked into that dining room and carried it out exactly as she had intended. Cold. Deliberate. Completely planned. And now I had the proof of it in writing, with a timestamp that told the whole story. One thing I kept thinking about through all of those months was Aaron. He had genuinely believed her. The look on his face that night at the dinner table was not the face of someone who was playing along. It was real shock, real hurt. The face of a person who felt truly betrayed by someone he trusted. He had no reason to question Maribel. She was my sister. She had appeared torn and reluctant, doing something painful because she felt it was right. He had seen what looked like clear evidence from a source close to both of them. He also had no idea their relationship had been arranged before ours ended. He believed they had come together in the natural aftermath of something that had simply broken apart. He was not her partner in any real sense. He was her prize. And he had been moved carefully into position without ever knowing it. He deserved to know the truth just as much as anyone in that wedding hall. The wedding planning that followed was large and very public. My mother posted constantly. Venue tours, flower arrangements, Maribel in dress after dress with captions full of words like dream and perfect and so deserved. I had been quietly removed from every family group chat, but Deo sent me updates when something significant happened. A large venue booked across the city. Over 200 guests invited. A live band confirmed for the reception. I read each update and felt completely calm. Not the brittle, forced calm of someone holding themselves together by effort. The genuine calm of someone who has already done all the necessary work and is simply waiting for the day to arrive. I had everything prepared and organized. I had been ready for some time. The only thing left was the invitation. And I knew it would come. Because Maribel needed me in that room. She had always needed me in that room. She simply had no idea why. The final piece arrived on a Friday evening. Petra called instead of messaging, which told me before she spoke that what she had found was important. She had been clearing out another archived folder and found a saved voice recording. She played it for me through the phone without explaining it first. It was Maribel's voice. Relaxed and laughing, the way she sounded when she was comfortable and not performing for anyone. The audio was clear. She said, "I had to make Vanessa look absolutely disgusting or he would never have left her." Then she laughed. I listened without moving or speaking. After the call ended, I sat alone in my apartment for a long time. Then I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had managed in almost a year. Not because I was happy. Because it was finally completely over. I had everything I needed. The wedding was in 3 weeks. The invitation arrived in the mail on a Wednesday, written on thick cream paper in Maribel's own careful handwriting. She wanted me at the wedding. When I told Deo, she went quiet for a moment and then said, "Why would she want you there?" I had already thought about that carefully. Maribel was not reaching out from guilt. She was not trying to build any kind of peace. She was inviting me because she wanted a witness to her victory. She had taken my fiancé, turned my family against me, and now she wanted me sitting in that hall watching her celebrate everything she had taken. My presence at her wedding was supposed to be the visible final proof that she had won completely. She had no idea what she was actually letting into that room. RSVP'd yes the same afternoon the envelope arrived. I folded the invitation neatly back into its envelope and placed it on my desk beside my folder. I bought a simple dark dress for the occasion. When relatives I had not spoken to in months asked if I was doing all right, I told them I was trying to move forward. I smiled when I said it. They looked relieved and said things like, "Family always finds its way back," and "that is the mature approach." Not one of them knew what I was carrying. Inside my bag, organized in a slim folder, were the printed screenshots with every flaw clearly labeled. Behind those was Petra's message with its 2-week timestamp. Behind that, the full written timeline, dated and sourced, in plain language anyone could follow. And saved in 2 separate locations on my phone, in case anything went wrong with one, was the voice recording. Maribel's voice. Her laugh. Her words. Spoken when she believed no one outside that single conversation would ever hear them. I checked everything twice the morning of the wedding. Then I got dressed and left. The venue was beautiful. White flowers lined every surface. Warm lighting made the whole space glow. A string quartet played near the entrance while guests in elegant clothing moved through the room, relaxed and smiling, completely unaware of what the evening was going to become. Maribel walked down the aisle looking radiant. Her dress was long and fitted, exactly the kind she had always described at family dinners when the topic came up. My mother sat in the front row, already crying. My father started clapping before anyone else moved. Aaron waited at the altar in a dark suit, looking like a man who believed entirely in what he was standing there for. I sat near the back and watched all of it quietly. A few relatives nodded in my direction, looking pleasantly surprised I had come. I smiled back at each of them and settled into my seat. My bag rested in my lap with my hands folded on top of it. At the reception, after dinner was served and the early speeches finished, Maribel took the microphone. She thanked her parents for always believing in love. She thanked Aaron for choosing her. She thanked the guests for being there to witness what she called the beginning of their real life together. Then she looked directly across the room at me. "Even the most difficult seasons," she said, pausing just long enough for the room to feel it, "lead us exactly where we are supposed to be." The guests applauded. A few relatives who knew our history glanced between us. Maribel smiled, the smile of someone who had just delivered the final word in a long argument and was certain it was over. I held her gaze for one moment. Then I raised my hand and asked the master of ceremonies if I might say a few words. He hesitated. He glanced at Maribel. She nodded, apparently deciding my presence here was simply one more layer of her victory. I walked to the microphone. I thanked the room and said I had something I wanted to share. Then I played the voice recording through the microphone. Maribel's own voice filled the entire hall. Relaxed, laughing. I had to make Vanessa look absolutely disgusting or he would never have left her. The room went silent in 2 seconds flat. I connected my phone to the venue display screen and showed the fake screenshots, walking through each inconsistency slowly and clearly. The timestamps, the font differences, the formatting errors that proved they had been built by hand rather than captured from any real conversation. Then I read Petra's message aloud. The one from 2 weeks before the dinner. "Once he leaves Vanessa, the rest will be easy." I was calm the entire time. My voice did not shake once. When I finished, Aaron had stepped back from Maribel. He was staring at her with his mouth open. Whatever he was trying to say, the rising noise of the room swallowed it completely. Maribel's smile had disappeared entirely. The room turned the way a tide turns, fast and all at once. Maribel screamed that I was destroying everything she had built. Her voice cracked and climbed, and the louder she became, the further people stepped away from her. Aaron turned and said, loud enough for several tables to hear clearly, "You lied to me?" My mother sat with both hands pressed over her face. My father stood completely still, the color leaving him slowly, like someone quietly losing the ground beneath his feet. Guests were standing. Some moved toward the exits. Others gathered in small clusters, speaking in urgent, low voices. Relatives who had once sent me long messages about betrayal and family loyalty were now looking at Maribel with the same expression they had once directed at me. Nobody stepped forward to protect her. Nobody offered an explanation or reached over to soften what 200 people had just heard in her own laughing voice. For the first time since that dinner table night, Maribel stood completely alone inside consequences she had created entirely herself. Maribel was still calling my name when I reached the exit. My mother's voice followed. Then my father's. Kept walking. Not from anger. The anger had burned away months ago, slowly and completely. I kept walking because there was nothing left in that room that I needed. The truth had been spoken out loud, in front of every person who mattered, in a voice that no one could dismiss or explain away or quietly slide back across a table. What they chose to do with it now was not mine to manage. I stepped outside into the cool night air and felt something release from my chest. A weight I had carried for nearly a year was simply no longer there. Maribel had planned to take my future. She had taken my fiancé, my family's trust, and nearly my belief in my own worth. But she had made one critical mistake in the end. She had wanted a witness to her victory. She had chosen me. She had written the invitation herself, addressed it in her own handwriting, and sent it to the one person who had spent 11 months preparing for exactly this evening. I walked to my car, sat in the quiet for one moment, and drove home. The woman behind that wheel was not the one who had frozen at that dinner table a year ago. Too shocked to speak, too hurt to move. She knew exactly who she was now. And she was done.